Coming up on The World Today. Reactions still trailing the U.S. president's return to the White House and the removal of his mask as he walked up the stairs. The World Health Organization raises hopes a coronavirus vaccine could be ready by the end of the year. Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny makes his first television appearance since returning to the country, having left Germany after his treatment. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Alexei Navalny. A show for the cameras. That's how media around the world is describing U.S. President Donald Trump's return to the White House following treatment for the coronavirus at the Walter Reed Military Hospital. Trump posed for the cameras as he made his highly choreographed return to the White House, having tweeted just hours before his return that he felt better and maybe immune. Wearing a white surgical mask, he gave a thumbs up and waved at reporters as he walked up to the executive mansion from the helicopter that flew him back from the hospital. He then removed his face mask and saluted. There has been a slew of criticisms over this supposed stunt by President Trump, especially of his handling of the coronavirus, which has killed more than 200,000 people in the country. Former First Lady Michelle Obama gave a withering assessment of this in a video endorsing Joe Biden, saying, "If you're a patient like me, you're feeling the consequences of this president's failure to take this pandemic seriously." Online posts in pro-Trump and anti-mask groups have said things like there is no need to wear a mask, while others for wearing of masks have raised concern over the president's actions. Well, there is perhaps no bigger critic of the U.S. president than the man who wants his job. Joe Biden, the Democratic Party's presidential nominee, criticized President Trump again for flouting mask wearing and social distancing guidelines, which he displayed on Monday.
I would hope that the president, having gone through what he went through, and I'm glad he seems to be coming along pretty well, would communicate the right lesson to the American people. Masks matter. These masks, they matter. It matters. It saves lives. It prevents the spread of the disease. Social distancing. You cannot mislead about certain things, and I'm not saying they have. If, in fact, the president had, in fact, contracted the virus and knew it before he went on in the public, encounters and was not wearing a mask, that's a different thing. Look, anybody who contracts the virus by essentially saying masks don't matter, social distancing doesn't matter, I think is responsible.
Well, let's talk to Channels Television's Washington correspondent, Maria Bird. Maria, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So, can you help us make sense of the message the U.S. president was trying to put out there when you compare that to how other world leaders would? So, who have recovered from the coronavirus have behaved and when returning to the office?
This is an amazing actual occurrence, I think, for many Americans. I think that when it first happened, people were questioning whether or not this was a part of the campaign and whether he was going into Walter Reed. And then I think because of some of the doctors' reports, people started to begin that maybe the president really was very ill from the coronavirus. But yesterday evening, his re-entry to the White House and him taking those long staircases up to the balcony area and then removing the mask and knowing that there were White House officials in that portion of the White House. And not only officials, but also those who are housekeeping staff, those who are the cooking staff, the maintenance staff, all of those individuals who are there working in both the residential side of the White House and also the West Wing are all potentially being exposed as he's walked into the home without a mask.
Well, a lot of people outside of America are also wondering how the U.S. president's actions could impact this fight against the global pandemic. So what sort of message do you think the president is putting out there to America's allies and partners? Is it possibly one of strength that he's beat the coronavirus?
I think that was the ultimate goal, was that this was going to be a message of strength, which I think many people were questioning in the beginning. Was this about really him being ill, or was this about a messaging of strength? And I think now we see that maybe it's about a messaging of strength. But I think many people are also, a little disappointed in the message that came out with him, was saying, don't be afraid of the coronavirus. And I think that does not necessarily lend itself to strength, but more so it lends itself to saying, wait a minute, are people afraid of this virus? What are you actually saying when there's over 200,000 people that have died as a result of this virus? So I don't know if many people that he was hoping got the message of strength really saw that. And also knowing that he was given a dosage of one of the potential coronavirus vaccines that they're in the process of testing, the clinical testing right now, Regeneron. And so people are probably saying, well, he's also had Regeneron, where there are many others, those 200,000 who have died, did not have the opportunity to have that type of drug to be able to help their bodies combat the virus.
And well, as we approach the elections, analysts have rightly pointed out that we're all talking about America's upcoming election, but more importantly, we're all talking about Donald Trump himself. I mean, we saw this happen back in 2015, so could it yield the same results as then?
Yes, I mean, I think that the question is really going to be, I think, tomorrow night. When we look at the vice presidential debate that will occur on Wednesday evening, that is going to really, I think, put a icing on the cake and a tipping point, because those who are very much in support of President Trump, who were out there, went outside of Walter Reed, those who were campaigning behind him and pushing his message forward, are going to be consistent supporters of his, regardless of what happens. But those who are on the fence, and those who are not sure, and those who are very concerned about the virus and about what's happening in the country with the economy, are probably going to be looking to the vice presidential candidates to see, what do you have to say? What kind of answers can I receive? Because they might not be solely, believing in presidential candidate Joe Biden. And so tomorrow's debate will probably have a major impact on the approval rating for the president, and also the votes that could potentially go toward presidential candidate Joe Biden.
All right, well, thank you so much again, Maria. We'll definitely be keeping our eye on that vice presidential debate tomorrow. Please stay safe out there.
Thank you for having me.
Over in the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has promised to transform his country rather than settle for the status quo after the coronavirus crisis by building more new homes, improving education, fighting crime, and boosting the green economy. During a speech aimed at rallying his Conservative Party, which has become increasingly critical of its leader, the Prime Minister laid out his vision for Britain. He has also referred to his own battle with weight loss, which made a bout of COVID-19 more difficult to overcome, as a metaphor for changing Britain. He listed the areas he wanted to tackle: housing, education, jobs, climate change, and crime.
After all we've been through, it isn't enough just to go back to normal. We've lost too much. We've mourned too many. We've been through too much frustration and hardship just to settle for the status quo ante, to think that life can go on as it was before the plague. And it will not, because history teaches us that events of this magnitude, wars, famines, plagues, events that affect the vast bulk of humanity, as this virus has, they don't just come and go. They are, more often than not, the trigger for an acceleration of social and economic change, because we human beings will simply not content ourselves with a repair job. We see these moments as the time to learn and to improve on the world that went before. And that's why this government will build back better.
The World Health Organization says there is hope an effective vaccine against the coronavirus pandemic could be ready by the end of this year. The message of hope is coming from Director General of the global body, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus. Now, this comes as more than 34 million people around the world have contracted the virus. Here's the global update.
The message from the Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, was not much as it pertained to how soon vaccines could be ready. Addressing the end of a two-day meeting of its executive board on the pandemic, he said,
"We will need vaccines, and there is hope that by the end of this year, we may have a vaccine. There is hope."
9 experimental vaccines are in the pipeline for the WHO COVAX global vaccine facility that aims to distribute 2 billion doses by the end of 2021. Meanwhile, organizers of an annual religious festival in the Senegalese city of Touba are expecting 3 to 5 million pilgrims this week, despite the main ceremony today being cancelled in an effort to lower the risk of coronavirus contagion. Other events are being video streamed to avoid overcrowding, but no restrictions were in place to prevent followers of the Morid Brotherhood from making the trip to the sacred site. Spain has become the first Western European nation to surpass 800,000 total coronavirus cases. The cumulative tally on Monday hit 813,412 after Health Ministry data registered 23,480 new infections over the weekend. And with 850 COVID-19 infections per 100,000 people, the Madrid area has Europe's highest rate. So, 4.8 million people in the city and 9 satellite towns have come under new restrictions from Friday. Italy has reactivated an action committee in fighting COVID-19 under the country's Civil Protection Department as fresh daily data confirm the contagion's upward trends again at the national level. The country recorded 2,257 new cases on Monday, bringing the total to 327,586, according to data released by the Ministry of Health. It is the 5th consecutive day of at least 2,000 infections. Finally, U.S. COVID-19 deaths surpassed 210,000 on Monday, according to data provided by the Johns Hopkins University, with the national caseload topping 7.4 million. The death toll across the United States rose to 210,117 as of past 7 in the evening. New York State reported 33,214 fatalities on top of the U.S. state-level death toll. Each state of Texas, California, and New Jersey recorded more than 16,000 deaths. Fatalities in Florida exceeded 14,000.
Well, let's turn now to Russia as opposition leader Alexei Navalny, who has returned to the country from Germany where he had been receiving treatment from poisoning, has spoken for the first time. In his first television interview, Navalny said he believes intelligence services poisoned him with a Novichok nerve agent because authorities saw him as a threat ahead of next year's parliamentary elections. German doctors say he was poisoned with a Novichok nerve agent. Germany, France, and other Western countries have demanded an explanation from the Kremlin for Navalny's illness. Navalny says he is undergoing physical therapy, but that his health has improved significantly and that doctors were surprised at the speed of his recovery. At least 11 people have been killed and dozens more were wounded in an explosion in the northwestern Syrian town of Al-Bab, which is under control of Turkey-backed rebel factions. A witness said the blast occurred when a large truck bomb went off in a crowded area in the town. Videos and images circulated by activists on social media showed large plumes of smoke rising from the blast site, along with several fires and damaged buildings. The video and images circulated by activists showed several wounded people being carried away from the blast site while firefighters tried to put out the fires. A nurse in a local hospital said 11 people had been killed. A doctor at a local hospital said at least 14 people were killed and 40 more were wounded. Several buildings were also damaged in the blast and collapse. Still ahead on The World Today. The Nobel winning streak is on. This time, 3 scientists win the Nobel Prize for Physics for their discoveries about the black hole. Stay with us. Thanks so much for staying with us. You're watching The World Today on Channels Television. Kyrgyzstan President Sooronbay Jeenbekov has called on his opponents to stop public protest, saying he had ordered security forces not to use firearms and reiterating his readiness to have the contested parliamentary election results annulled. In a statement on his website, President Jeenbekov describes the actions of protesters who took over government and security headquarters as a bid by some political forces to seize power illegally. He had called for calm and asked security forces not to open fire on the protesters. Meanwhile, members of Kyrgyzstan Central Election Commission, Gulnar Zurbayeva, says that organizing a rerun election in the country could be difficult in the current circumstances as the situation is unstable. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has rallied support from Washington's closest allies in Asia, calling for a deeper collaboration with Japan, India, and Australia as a bulwark against China's growing regional influence. Pompeo warned against what he described as the Chinese Communist Party's exploitation and coercion and corruption. Speaking in Tokyo at the start of the gathering of the U.S., Japanese, Australian, and Indian foreign ministries, the Quad, Pompeo said all these partners were seeking a free and open Indo-Pacific.
When we met last year, the landscape was very different. We couldn't have imagined a pandemic that came from Wuhan. That crisis was made infinitely worse by the Chinese Communist Party's cover-up. The regime's authoritarian nature led its leaders to lock up and silence the very brave Chinese citizens who were raising the alarm. America stands with each of you as we work to achieve victory over this horrible pandemic and rebuild our economies together. As partners in this Quad, it is more critical now than ever that we collaborate to protect our people and partners from the CCP's exploitation, corruption, and coercion.
European Commission Vice President Maros Sefcovic says the full and timely implementation of the Brexit deal from the UK is not debatable. He was speaking to the European Parliament, where he also said the EU's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, and his team had the EU's full support. He even mentioned the UK's internal market bill, which he says explicitly broke the country's withdrawal treaty with the EU.
The fact that our British friends now all of a sudden propose the draft bill that by its very nature is a breach of this withdrawal agreement is a heavy blow to the British signature and reliability. Respecting agreements is first a matter of law, but also of trust and a good faith. And this is why last week the Commission started an infringement procedure by sending a letter of formal notice to the UK government. We invited them to submit their observation by the beginning of November. The full and timely implementation of the withdrawal agreement is simply not debatable. In case we reach an agreement, which is our objective, both parties will have to ensure ratification in time for an entry into force by 1st January 2021. And this will need some time, including time for this House. If this is not the case, we will be in the no-deal territory. Given that we are less than 100 days away from this date, we cannot exclude this scenario.
Meanwhile, the United Nations Human Rights Office in South Korea has called for an impartial investigation into the killing of a fisheries official by northern troops at sea last month, after being urged by the man's family in the UN to conduct its own probe. The death of Lee Dae-jun has sparked dispute over why and how he was found floating in North Korean waters nearly 36 hours after he went missing. South Korea said their investigation suggests Lee wanted to defect to the north, but his family disputes that. In the run-up to World Mental Health Day on October 10th, a Human Rights Watch report documents how about 800 people with psychosocial disabilities in countries like China, Indonesia, Nigeria, Kenya, and Mexico live shackled for years, chained to trees, locked in cages, and imprisoned in animal sheds. It, however, says around the world, in the state-run and private centers and traditional and religious healing institutions, handlers deny people food, force medications and herbal remedies on them, and met out physical and sexual violence. The watchdog said families often shackle their loved ones out of fear they will escape and harm themselves or others, and that there is the belief that in many countries that these people are bewitched. John McAfee, an antivirus software creator indicted in the United States on fraud charges, has been arrested in Barcelona airport. He was detained on Saturday as he was about to board a flight to Istanbul with a British passport, the source told Reuters, adding that he would be transferred to Spain's capital, Madrid, to face an extradition process. U.S. federal prosecutors unsealed an indictment on Monday against McAfee over charges that he evaded taxes and willfully failed to file returns. Now, that came shortly after the Securities and Exchange Commission revealed it had brought civil charges against McAfee, alleging he made over $23.1 million in an undisclosed compensation from false and misleading cryptocurrency recommendations. He is alleged to have earned millions in income from promoting cryptocurrencies, as well as through consulting work, speaking engagements, and selling the rights to his life story for a documentary. Elsewhere, Belgian artist and the country's new princess said on Monday she was not expecting anything from the Belgian royal family and her new siblings after a court last week granted her the right to use the title. Formerly known as Delphine Boel, Delphine of Saxe-Coburg had been fighting a 7-year legal battle to prove that Belgium's former King Albert II is her father and was crowned in court on October 1st, officially becoming a princess. Belgium's appeals court has granted Delphine Boel the title of Princess of Belgium after the former monarch's DNA test proved that he was her father and changed her surname to her father's constitutional name, Saxe-Coburg.
Using you in your name, I'll be very happy to make it for, to do good with it.
All right, well, thanks so much for staying with us. I'm Alexei Navalny. Stay safe.